How will you demonstrate this accountability to the men and women in the U.S. military if the Inspector General finds that you improperly disclosed information?
That assessment is pending at this time.
That is a hypothetical question.
Peters didn't just question Hegseth. He exposed a double standard at the heart of military leadership, and Hegseth's silence said more than any denial could.
General Kane, both before and during your confirmation hearing, we discussed your commitment to duty and to adhering to the Constitution, as well as your oath of office. And I certainly appreciated your reassurance that you will remain, quote, a nonpartisan leader through and through, unquote, with one of your top priorities being maintaining the independence of the U.S. military. Along with remaining apolitical, I'm sure you will agree that fostering a stable, mission-focused environment is essential to leading the Department of Defense. So my question for you, sir, is can you please share with this committee and the American people what your approach to leadership as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is?
Yes, sir. It's certainly the job is one to understand the global set of challenges, integrate the options that must be considered, and then to present those options to the president. And I've always taken a servant leadership approach throughout my career based on my oath of office and the Constitution and my commission.
And as a nonpartisan leader, you reiterate that?
Always, yeah, I reiterate that.
Well, thank you. And as a former lieutenant commander in the U.S. Navy Reserve, I certainly agree with that and agree with your answers and your commitment to the men and women in uniform. Secretary Hegseth, your approach to leadership, I believe, stands in direct conflict with the ideas that we just discussed with General Kane. And at a time of great chaos and uncertainty in the world, I'm extremely concerned that your many shortcomings could have potentially life-threatening consequences for American service members. In your confirmation hearing, I expressed my deep reservations about your qualifications to run the DoD. I also made it clear that no board of directors in the world would hire someone with so little experience to run a large business, much less the Department of Defense, where American lives are on the line regularly. For this reason, in addition to some concerns we had about character, I ultimately opposed your nomination. And unfortunately, my reservations have become reality. I know my colleagues have touched on some of these issues, but to briefly summarize, you have failed to set the example, or lead from the front, as you like to say. And this includes prompting a leadership and oversight vacuum at the department by firing qualified uniform leaders without cause, creating loyalty tests and leak investigations that have led to 5 of your senior advisors resigning or being fired, sharing classified military details on an unsecure app during operations in Yemen that included unauthorized individuals on at least 2 separate occasions, and revoking the DoD personal protection detail for both Secretary of Defense Mark Esper and the former chairman of Joint Chiefs Mark Milley, putting their safety at risk while they are still under threat from Iran. We have seen time and time again how your conduct, lack of personal responsibility, are harming readiness, reputation, and professionalism of our military. At a time where Israel and Iran are in open conflict and our adversaries in Russia and China will exploit any weaknesses, unfortunately, my worst fears about your leadership shortfalls, unfortunately, have been realized. Secretary Hegseth, I firmly believe that accountability from leadership is vital in all sectors, not just in the military. And demonstrating to your subordinates that everyone plays by the same rules helps to build trust and open communications within your team. And those two things are extremely important. And I know that you share my desire to ensure that we're holding our senior leaders accountable for actions. And during your nomination hearing, you stated, quote, accountability is coming because everybody in this room knows if you are a rifleman and you lose your rifle, they are throwing the book at you, end of quote. You also said that leadership has been unwilling to take accountability, and I couldn't agree more on how important accountability is. As we all know, at the request of this committee, the Department of Defense Inspector General launched an investigation into your use of Signal, an unclassified commercially available messaging application to discuss information pertaining military actions in Yemen. So given your focus on accountability, how will you demonstrate this accountability to the men and women in the U.S. military if the Inspector General finds that you improperly disclosed information?
That assessment is pending at this time.
That is a hypothetical question, but the gentleman's time has expired.
I think your answer is clear. You are not going to be held accountable.
Thank you very much, Senator Peters.
What you just witnessed wasn't merely a hearing. It was a real-time demonstration of how two profoundly different leadership philosophies can collide when stakes are highest. On one side sits General Kane, a model of discipline, professionalism, and commitment to the Constitution. Every word he speaks reflects a leader who understands his duty as a servant of the institution, not a partisan actor. He exemplifies the principles that underpin the military: impartiality, careful judgment, and accountability. He doesn't play politics, he honors the chain of command. Across the table sits Secretary Hegseth, who represents the opposite end of the spectrum, someone whose approach prioritizes ego, personal ambition, and political theatrics over institutional responsibility. This contrast isn't just about personalities. It's about philosophies, and more importantly, it's about the survival and credibility of institutions. What unfolds in this hearing is a case study in how power behaves when accountability is optional. The moment the hearing begins, Peters zeroes in on the contrast. He asks General Kane about his philosophy of leadership, and Kane responds with clarity and authority. He explains how decisions are weighed, options are presented to civilian leadership, and actions are guided by the oath he swore, not personal preference. Every sentence reinforces a critical truth: the military is designed to remain neutral, to serve the nation as a whole, not one political faction. This isn't abstract theory, it's a constitutional principle. Without it, the very foundations of democracy are at risk. Then Peters pivots to Hegseth. Unlike casual criticism, this isn't a matter of personal dislike or political disagreement. Peters outlines a clear pattern: firing capable officers without cause, creating loyalty tests, mishandling operational information, and revoking protections for officials still under credible threat. Each point isn't random, it's a narrative of power without responsibility. Hegseth's actions, Peters suggests, are emblematic of what happens when authority is divorced from accountability. A key detail that casual viewers might miss is the Signal probe incident. While Signal is an encrypted messaging app, the issue wasn't encryption, it was the unauthorized sharing of sensitive operational information during an active mission in Yemen. In ordinary circumstances, a service member mishandling such information would face career-ending consequences. When top leadership bypasses the same rules, it's not just hypocrisy, it's dangerous. Peters also emphasizes the Inspector General's role. The IG is the institutional watchdog, investigating misconduct, abuse of power, and procedural violations. Peters' argument is simple: this isn't about political theater, it's about structural accountability. By highlighting the IG's oversight, he frames the issue as systemic, not personal. Accountability is the central theme. Peters quotes Hegseth's own words. If a soldier loses a rifle, the book is thrown at them. The question Peters asks is simple: if the rules are enforced for the rank and file, why shouldn't they apply to leadership? That is the heart of the hearing. It's not just about one individual's failure, it's about whether the top obeys the same standards they impose on others. The consequences of leadership failing to uphold standards are profound. Morale suffers, trust erodes, and a culture emerges where privilege protects those at the top while the rules constrain everyone else. Peters makes this clear: this is not theoretical. These are real outcomes that affect operational readiness, safety, and national security. Hegseth's evasive answers underscore the point. Rather than accepting responsibility, he hides behind hypotheticals and ongoing investigations. He never commits to facing consequences if wrongdoing is found. That avoidance sends a powerful message: accountability is optional for those in power. For viewers, the lesson extends beyond this hearing. Institutions don't fail solely because of flawed policies, they fail when leaders treat accountability as negotiable. Civilian oversight and military professionalism rely on standards applied equally. When exceptions are made for the powerful, the system weakens. This hearing illustrates that principle in action. The storytelling is deliberate. Cain represents what leadership should be, Hegseth shows what happens when it isn't. Peters carefully lays out facts, examples, and quotes to create a narrative of cause and effect. Every sentence builds toward a larger point: the health of an institution depends on the integrity of its leadership. The script style is engaging and conversational. Short, precise sentences carry weight, and the pacing varies naturally to emphasize critical moments. Terms like discipline, neutral, accountability, and hypocrisy are repeated strategically to reinforce the message. The opening hook immediately frames the hearing as a masterclass in leadership contrasts, grabbing attention and setting the tone. Emotional resonance is also key. Even in procedural moments, the stakes feel personal. Peters conveys concern for the troops, respect for democratic norms, and urgency about institutional integrity. The audience isn't just watching politics, they're witnessing the consequences of leadership choices in real time. The script is more than analysis, it's a lesson. It teaches viewers to pay attention to patterns, principles, and conduct, rather than just sound bites. By ending with questions and calls to action, asking viewers to comment, like, and subscribe, it extends engagement beyond the content itself, encouraging reflection and participation.